Baruch Dayan Haemet. The Queen is dead, long live the King. Most of you listening to this, since English is your language, Americans accepted, will have been brought up either in the UK or one of the countries of the Commonwealth. And the sad news today of the passing of Queen Elizabeth II will have had an effect, a profound effect. This is a lady, the likes of whom we'll never see again. 70 years on the throne, a rock, a woman, probably the most recognizable, the most popular, the most beloved woman in the world. And it's a time for reflection. Any momentous time in history is a time for us to stop and take stock and think about what this means to us. And I immediately thought of a Dvar Torah that the rabbi of our community, Rav Yuval, wrote actually for this week's Parashat earlier this week, before the Queen was ill and obviously before the Queen passed away. And I think it's very poignant. Rav Yuval points out a very interesting thing, that we have in our Sedra of Tetze a dichotomy in terms of how we are to treat other nations. On the one hand, we have the famous mitzvah, which we all are familiar with, of Mechiat Amalek, Zachor et asher sa lecha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you. Timche et zeicha Amalek. Rub out the memory of Amalek. We've got nothing to do with them. We've got to destroy their memory. And in similar vein, Lo yavo Amoni uMoavi bikal Adonai, gam dor asiri lo yavo lahem bikal Adonai ad olam. And a Moabite and an Ammonite cannot come into the community of God. In other words, they can't convert and marry a Jewish person. And we're told a reason for that. Al davar asher lo kidmu etchem balechem ubamayim baderech b'tzeitchem mimitzrayim. Because they never came out and gave us water and bread when we left Egypt. They didn't come and give us something to help us. They stood by. And yet, on the other hand, just a couple of psukim later, we have Lo teta'ev mitzri ki ger hayita ba'artzo. Do not despise the Egyptian because you were a stranger in his land. And as Rabbi Yuval points out, if I was to say to you, what's your first thoughts about Egypt and the Bnei Israel? You would all say they were rotten. They made us slaves. They killed our boys. They threw them in the river. They squeezed babies into the wall. They were taskmasters. It was a terrible thing. They made our lives bitter. And yet we're told that we're not allowed to despise an Egyptian because we were strangers in their land. And Moab and Ammon, who really didn't do that, nothing so terrible. Okay, they didn't bring us provisions when we left Egypt, but they didn't enslave us. Them, we don't have anything to do with. So what's going on here? What's the difference? The difference is Kiger Hayita Ba'artzo. Before we were enslaved, we were guests in their homes, in their land, the Egyptian land. Our people were refugees to Egypt. We were refugees from famine. Yaakov went down to Egypt with his family to escape the famine in Eretz Canaan. They were refugees. They were economic refugees, but they were refugees. And they were given a home in the land of Egypt. They were given the fat of the land. They were given Goshen, which was the best part of town. And before they were enslaved, they were treated very well. We were hosted by the Egyptians and we were treated nicely. And we're never to forget that. We're never to forget that, despite what happened later on. The Torah is teaching us a fundamental lesson, and that is one of Hakarat HaTov, of recognizing the good, being grateful. I remember as a kid, one of the very first things that I remember being taught in kindergarten was that it came to the 10 plagues. Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to strike the river to make it into blood, and was not allowed to strike the earth to make it into kinim, lice, because they had done him a favor. These inanimate objects had done him a favor. The river had saved his life because he was in the little box, and the sand had saved his life because it covered over the Egyptian whom he'd killed. So we were told that you had to be grateful even to inanimate objects. How much more so should you have to be grateful both to human beings and to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself? So with the passing of the Queen, I think it's an appropriate time to stop and recognize the Hakarat HaTov that so many of us, my family for sure, and I imagine the families of most of you listening to this, the Hakarat HaTov, the gratitude that we should feel to Great Britain, the United Kingdom, represented by the Queen, for the fact that we were Ger Hayita Ba'artso. We were strangers in that land. Our families came as migrants, either economic migrants or migrants, refugees escaping pogroms, or those that came escaping Nazi Germany that bit later. All of these, we came, and the Great Britain, United Kingdom opened its gates. The Queen, who represents the UK and the Commonwealth, opened her arms, as it were, metaphorically, and welcomed us, gave us a home. And I, for one, have the most enormous debt of gratitude to the UK. And I feel that this is a time that I want to recognize that the UK gave my grandparents a home. It gave my parents who were born in the UK a citizenship. It gave me a wonderful education. And even though I don't live there anymore, I recognize the Hakarat HaTov that I owe to the United Kingdom. And with the passing of the Queen, it's an appropriate time to stop and recognize that, and recognize other things that we need to be grateful for as well. It's an opportunity to stop and take stock and be thankful for what we have had. And I salute Her Majesty the Queen. May she rest in peace. Shabbat Shalom.